So this video is kind of hard to talk about because it's literally something that I'm just beginning to kind of like realize and put together at 23 years old. But essentially what that is believe it or not, but I feel like a lot of us are actually addicted to our suffering. We sort of prefer our suffering over letting go, over moving on, over healing, over transforming and coming out of that suffering. Now, there's two, or I guess I could say at least two main reasons as to why we're addicted to our suffering. The first being that the reason we're addicted to our suffering is because that pain, that trauma, whatever it is that sort of triggered it, whatever our traumatic event was that triggered that trauma that we've been living in for a day, a month, a decade, that pain is parallel with a story we've been telling ourselves of who we are. Meaning that pain is in line with an inner narrative about who we are. You could think of like the victim mentality of nobody's ever there for me, everybody always screws me over, the world is a horrible place, you know, all this sort of woe is me stuff, and I am the victim of outer circumstances. When we've been, now it's important to note that that mentality can be born out of a legitimately traumatizing experience. But when you sort of constantly reiterate and recite that story to yourself, it begins to create this filter where you don't pick up on anything else in your life that isn't in line with that inner narrative, which is literally the definition of confirmation bias, where when you have a victim mentality, you sort of weed out all other experiences that go against the grain of that victim mentality, so that all you surround yourself with are victimhood-like situations, so that you can sort of validate that inner narrative, that inner prophecy that you've been telling yourself for so long. So that's the first main reason that we're addicted to our suffering, is that it's in line, it's parallel with an inner narrative of who we think we are. And we could have been telling ourselves this story of who we think we are for a really long time, where we really start to get ingrained and entrenched in this dialogue, this inner story of our suffering, you know? So that's the first reason that we're, in a way, preferring our pain. There's another reason. I guess I could say that there's three, like I said, at least three reasons here as to why we're preferring to stay in this pain over moving on. So the second reason, first being it's in line with a story we're telling ourselves of who we are. The second reason is it's familiar. And the longer you've gone living in this pain mentality, this dialogue, this story of who you are that's based out of a traumatic experience you had a year ago or 10 years ago, or sort of like a series of traumatic experiences, you know, like a pattern. The longer you've been living in that, this is a paradox. Although the pain of living in that story is so horrible and it's despairing, living in that victim mentality, living in that mentality of thinking that you're at a deficit in life because of something that happened years ago, although that pain is so intense and so visceral and so seemingly debilitating to your daily life, there's a comfort in it. And the reason it's comfortable is because you know it. It's because you know it. It's a pattern. It's predictable. Even if what you're predicting is that you're going to be let down, you're going to be used, you're going to be betrayed, you'll never find somebody, you'll never be better, you'll never be financially stable, whatever your story is, even though it's so horrible and so debilitating to your daily life and functioning in your life, it's predictable and therefore is, in a way, paradoxically comforting, where you sort of know who you are. You're reiterating, you're reciting to yourself constantly that this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. I'm going to be screwed over. The world is going to screw me over. I'm never going to be this. I'm never going to be enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. You know, you're reciting this story and it's we begin to develop this sort of scar tissue around our hearts, and we sort of sit in that pain. We hang out in that pain, and it's comfortable. It's comfortable. And anything that goes outside or against the grain of that story of the victim mentality or the story of our trauma that we have, it's in a way threatening. Anything that goes against the grain of that inner narrative that we're telling ourselves, which is what's keeping us trapped in that pain, it's threatening to us, even if it's literally the gateway out of the pain. And see, that leads me into the third reason, at least third reason, why we're so addicted to our pain. And that third reason is what it would take to leave that pain behind would be a complete 100% reorientation of who we think we are, who we think others are, where we put blame, where we put fault, where we put power and responsibility, what we think life is. That's the third reason that we're sort of addicted and entrenched in our pain, is that in order to step out of that, in order to let go of it, in order to transform ourselves, we need to leave that story behind. Because that story is kind of what's keeping us in there. Maybe a lot more than kind of. Maybe that story is the reason we're still stuck in that pain. Because maybe that story is, like I said a while ago, putting a filter over our eyes where we're sort of weeding out all other potential experiences that could be the way out of that pain, and but we're not seeing them because we're wearing this filter, and the filter that we're looking through is our inner narrative of trauma and pain and heartbreak and loss and betrayal and feeling inadequate and feeling not good enough and all this stuff. So the first reason that the pain, that we're so addicted to our pain, is that it's familiar. We know it. It's in line with who we think we are, a story that we've been telling ourselves. The second reason that we're so addicted and entrenched in our pain is, like I said a second ago, it's familiar. We know it. So there's this sort of paradoxical comfort in it, where even though it's horrible, even though I am despairing and agonizing every single day, at least I can expect that. At least it's kind of this bed of known. And see, that coming out of that pain would mean to step into the unknown. And the third reason that we're so addicted to our suffering, and another way you could put it is preferring our suffering, is because what is required in stepping out of that pain is a complete reorientation, a complete transformation of who we think we are. I hope that makes sense. So to give you an example, think of somebody who's 40 years old and for 25 years they've just been a dick. They've been a jerk. Everybody knows it. Maybe even they know it. And when somebody asks them, dude, why are you such a jerk? Why are you such a jerk? And the guy says, well, it's because my alcoholic dad beat me when I was a kid. Can you see how, although that is very much so a traumatizing experience for that individual in this example, and that's not really an ideal way to be raised at all, can you see how that individual is disempowering himself by blaming his father? And here, there's sort of like a paradox within it. And this is the kicker here, where that individual is disempowering himself, saying, the reason I'm a dick is because my dad was a dick. He's doubling it and giving it to the next person. He's passing the buck down the line. And go figure, you go and ask this guy's dad, hey, why did you beat your kid? Why were you such a jerk to your kid? He blames his dad. And all of a sudden you get all the way back to Adam and Eve. So everyone is blaming. So in a weird, paradoxical way, this individual who is a jerk because his dad beat him when he was a kid, although he's disempowering himself by blaming his dad, there's also a sense of power within that. Because he's not responsible for why he's a jerk. He is subject to what his dad did to him when he was a kid, and that's why he is the way he is. So he doesn't need to take accountability when he's a jerk to you. He doesn't need to take accountability when he treats people horribly, because it's his dad's fault. So although it's kind of like a 2-in-1. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 paradox where he's disempowering himself from ever getting better by blaming his father, but also at the same time deriving a sense of power out of it where it's not his fault. It's his dad's fault. And that's why he can't better himself, because he is a product of his upbringing. And so it's his dad's fault as to why he's a jerk. So we're giving away our power to ever be better, but the reason we're doing that is because there's a sense of weird, comforting power within that where I'm doing the best I can. My dad raised me horribly, so that's why I'm a jerk. I can't get better because of my upbringing. We don't realize that in the same moment that we're sort of feeling righteous in our trauma, in our pain, we're also completely disempowering ourselves from ever taking accountability and realizing that it's in our hands. It's really unfortunate what happened in your childhood, in this person's childhood, that his dad was an alcoholic and abused him and stuff. But what we need to do is realize that that's back then. And if anything, now this isn't to downplay the intensity of suffering and trauma that people go through, but what I'm trying to say here is that that pain in that individual's upbringing should act as jet fuel to not be like that, to not let that define and characterize his life. If you go around being a jerk to people because your dad was a jerk, you're no better than your dad. You're literally a spitting image of him. You know what I'm saying? But if you take accountability and realize that it's up to you how you look at the world, how you treat yourself, how you treat others, the way the story that you're telling yourself, when you realize that, that's when your horrible upbringing becomes direct catalyst for immense transformation. And see, that's the main difference here is, like, if you've been going years, like I said, this 40-year-old jerk has been being a jerk for 25 years, think about the fear and anxiety and unsettling nature of suddenly taking accountability for the fact that he's not a jerk because his dad was a jerk. He's a jerk because he's been using his rough upbringing as an excuse to why he's not putting in the work to better himself. And that's it right there. Where part of the reason that we prefer our pain is because it takes the accountability out of our hands. We're not responsible for our actions, and we are a victim of circumstances. So we can go around saying, I'm doing the best I can. But see, I'm at a deficit. I'm traumatized. I'm trapped in this pain because of how I was raised, or because this person left me, or because this person died, or because of my job, or my relationship, or whatever it is, you know, or my social, economical situation, you know. When we tell ourselves that story, we're completely disempowering ourselves, and the only sort of payoff that we're getting from it is feeling like it's not our fault. But that feeling, that emotional payoff of feeling like it's not my fault, comes at the cost of never being able to better ourselves, and always blaming. Saying it's the outside world that's at fault. It's that person's fault. It's this business's fault. It's my upbringing's fault. It's the government's fault. It's my parents' fault. It's my genetics' fault. You know what I'm saying? When we live in our pain, we're telling ourselves this story that we don't have what it takes to better ourselves. You know what I'm saying? This is, like I said, this is a complicated thing to talk about, because it's like, not only is it new to me to like see into this, but it's something that's like really kind of heavy loaded, you know? Where we're living in these patterns, you know what I'm saying? I don't know about you guys, but like, I wake up in the morning and I just start like reciting my problems. And of course I'm trying not to do that. I'm actively working on shifting that inner dialogue, that inner story of gotta go to work and oh, this is sad and that sucks. And we wake up and we recite our pain. We reiterate, we recite the story back to ourselves of why I'm lacking, why it's never enough, why I'm not good enough, why the world is messed up, why it's the outside world's fault that I feel the way I do inside. You know, we repeat and reiterate and recite this story to ourselves, and all it does is just solidify it more and more and more until it acts like blinders, where we can't see anything other than that story that we're telling ourselves. Where all we see, confirmation bias, all we see in the world is stuff that's in line with that inner story we're telling ourselves. Like if you're somebody that's had a cycle, this cycle of constantly attracting toxic, abusive, narcissistic partners, and you're living in this story of, I always attract people who betray me. I always attract people who abuse me. I always attract people who make me feel like I'm not enough and I'm not good enough and I need to fight to prove my value to this horrible person. You know what I'm saying? If you're somebody that feels like you just have this cycle of those kind of relationships, somebody comes along and they're a good person, they treat you good, but you say, well, they're not tall enough. Well, they're too nice to me. Well, they're kind of not that. Well, they're not into that. And we sort of weed through all these potentially amazing partners that go against the grain of that cycle of attracting toxic partners. And then the toxic partner comes along and we get googly eyes and we fall for them. And then because they're a toxic partner, they leave us. You know what I'm saying? And we go, see, everybody always leaves me. Even though you have rejected and turned down all these people who would have been the ending of that line of trauma, of that traumatic cycle, that toxic pattern. But because you're stuck in that story of, I only attract toxic partners, you're going to sabotage something that isn't congruent with that story. Somebody comes along and you say, I don't know. Oh, they're too nice to me. Imagine that. Imagine that. I mean, I understand, obviously, the cringiness of, like, you know, but what I'm saying is when somebody comes along that goes against that inner narrative where they're not a toxic partner, they're not going to abuse you, they're not going to betray you, they're not going to use you, we start to get all weird inside. What the hell? They're actually treating me nicely. You know what I'm saying? But I thought I only attract people who are going to use me and abuse me and this and that. You know what I'm saying? And so we start to sabotage the situation where we put all this weight and pressure and awkwardness on their shoulders, you know what I'm saying? And until we either push them away out of our own inner delusion or they go away because of the stress of our paranoia. And then we keep hunting, and we're looking for somebody who lines up with that story we're telling ourselves. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Like, we're sifting through the world of infinite potential, of infinite circumstance, of a world that can be perceived in an infinite number of ways, and we're looking at it only through this myopic, one-sided, biased view so that we feel right. Because even though, like I've said multiple times, even though we're suffering, at least we're right. At least it's predictable. At least I know what I'm going to wake up and think and feel tomorrow. At least I know how this relationship is going to pan out. Because I always attract toxic partners that betray me. You see what I'm saying? At least I know that because I'm a dickhead, it's not my fault, but rather my dad's fault. I don't have to take responsibility for that. Because it's my dad, it's how he brought me up. You know what I'm saying? This victim mentality, there's this weird, although I've already described it, although we're disempowering ourselves and giving away our ability to overcome it, there's this sense of comfort in it, in feeling like it's not our fault and we're subject to it. I didn't ask to be born, man. So I get to stomp around and be a jerk and hurt people because I didn't ask to be born, bro. I get to go around and treat everybody like crap because my dad was mean to me as a kid. When the wise thing to do, the powerful thing to do, the power move in that situation is to step up, to show your dad and any other abusive, toxic partner or business or whatever it is, to show them that their negativity and their nasty bullshit doesn't define you. It doesn't limit you. You're not gonna live in this self-fulfilling prophecy of negativity based off of the criteria of how they treated you. You show them, and I mean, it's not even for them, it's for yourself to say, dude, that's not gonna define me. My dad treating me like shit, I'm glad he did that because he showed me, like, verbatim how not to be. He showed me how not to treat a kid, how not to carry yourself as a man, how not to be just as a human in general. When you take your power back in the same way that there's a weird paradox where you disempower yourself, but there's this sense of comfort for feeling like it's not your fault, when you take that power back, it is the biggest liberation you will ever feel. Realizing that it's in your hands and it's in your power, but there's also this sense of like panic and anxiety and also sort of maybe even shame or guilt that for years you've been living as though it wasn't up to you and you didn't have what it took to better yourself. And now all of a sudden you're realizing, oh my God, I'm shaping and carving that inner narrative, which is why I'm living the life that I am. And so it is up to me. It is in my power to better myself, to shift that inner narrative. There's almost like this dual-sided like liberation, but also shock in realizing, oh my God, it is up to me. It's up to me how I see things, how I live my life, the story that I tell myself that defines who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like you wake, there's countless examples of living in this victim mentality of we're living in like limiting beliefs. We're like milking our drama for a feeling of, see, look, I've been through it, man, and I don't have what it takes because I've been through so much. We're milking it and we're not ready to let go of that pain, because the moment we let go of that pain is when we realize that it's up to us to shape and orchestrate the way we see life, the way we live our life. And it's up to us to like step into this realization of like, that stuff back then isn't why I am who I am now. You know, there's this quote, man is the sum of his actions or something like that. That's not really true, considering the fact that in this moment right now, which is the sum of all my actions and all that stuff, I can go and rearrange and reevaluate and analyze stuff that defined who I am now, therefore changing the very outlook of those actions that I am the sum of now, if that makes sense. So it's in our hands. The power is in our hands. We are the poet. We are the writer of the story. But when you step into that power, not only are you going to realize the weight off your shoulders of realizing like, holy shit, like, it's up to me. I'm not a victim of my past. I'm not a victim of the world. Although we're going to feel that liberation, we're also going to feel the weight of realizing the disempowering belief that we've been living in, and that's something to let go of. The second you feel yourself, well, it's because you stop yourself right there. You think, well, how am I going to respond to what they did? You know, Ram Dass has this quote. He says, another person does what they do because that's what they did. And the way you respond to that is where your power is. They just did what they did because that's what they did based off of where they were at. And it's up to you using your willpower, your mind, your wisdom, your intelligence, your love, your strength to choose how you respond to that situation. rather than living in this disempowered victim mentality where you're like a puppet to the outside world. You know what I'm saying? I have a direct example for you guys of a time that I literally chose pain because it was more in line with who I thought I was than to step into the feeling of liberation from that pain. And it was scary because it was so unknown. So a few years ago, this girl had left me and I was heartbroken, and it was like the most intense heartbreak ever that I've ever had, you know, and if you've been through it, you know the whole deal. You wake up and it's just this despair, and every single moment is like a reminder of how they're not there, and oh, they've left me and I'm heartbroken, and I just wish this person would come back. And I feel my phone vibrate because I got sent a message, and I'm like, was it her? Was it her? What if it's her? I'm gonna imagine it's her in the quantum realm, and you know, like far out shit. Like I was deep in the wells and the pain of being heartbroken, and who I was for almost like 2 years was somebody who's heartbroken that this girl is no longer with them. And then one day I woke up, and I don't know what I was doing, but it dawned on me that I didn't care that she was gone. It was okay. It was actually kind of cool. It was like, doesn't matter that she's here or not. Like, it's okay. That was a beautiful experience that I had with her, and the universe played out in the way it did, and she's not here anymore, and that's chill, man. That's cool. And I felt this immense peace and liberation and just joy of like, it was the opposite of all the despair I'd been living in, the despair and the depression I'd been living in for close to 2 years, you know what I'm saying? And it was just, like it's okay. But what did I do in that moment? Did I sort of embrace that peace and relaxation and say, I'm moving on, I've turned the corner? That was an amazing experience, and now I'm ready to rebuild myself. Now I'm ready to carry on with my life. Is that the direction I went when I felt this window of liberation? Or did I literally run out into the woods and put headphones on and play music that her and I used to listen to together and like force myself to cry about how she's gone? I literally did that. When I felt this window of liberation from that pain that I'd become so accustomed to and so intimate with over the past 2 years, it was so inconsistent with the inner narrative of who I had, of the inner narrative I had of who I was, that it scared the hell out of me. And so what I did was I ran out into the woods. This is no joke. And I listened to music that me and her used to listen to together, and I like reburied myself. You know, this window of liberation was like stepping out of the grave for a moment, and what I did was I stepped back into the grave and pulled all the dirt in over me, because it was in line with who I thought I was. Who I thought I was somebody who's heartbroken that this girl isn't here anymore. So when I experienced a moment of feeling free from that pain, although it was the most intense joy and peace that I'd felt in 2 years, I would have rather been back in that pain because it was congruent with a narrative I had of who I was. It's far out stuff, and in retrospect, looking back on this, I was just like, dude, like that was the beginning of me realizing that we get addicted to our suffering. We prefer our suffering because it's comfortable and we know it, and we're so used to it. It's so familiar, you know? And in another sense, we can think that like talking in the context of someone breaking up with us and leaving us, or maybe even a loved one dying or a pet dying, we can get in this mindset of thinking that the grief and the heartbreak that we feel in regard to that thing leaving us is a sign of how much we really loved that thing. And if we were to let go of that grief, it kind of cues to us that like we don't care. But not only is that not true at all, but that mindset is what keeps you locked in the grief. And I definitely got stuck in that mindset with this girl that had left me a few years ago, thinking that if I became okay it would show that I don't care that she's gone. But I do care that she's gone. So what I'm going to do is be depressed every single day for 2 years as a sign, as a virtue, as a sign of like my virtue of how much I love her. Where I love you so much that I'm going to be miserable if you're not with me. And I'm never going to let go of that pain, because that pain is a token of the depth and value of how much I loved you. It's far out stuff, man. It's far out stuff. And like when you start to catch wind of how like we're married to our pain, we're married to our suffering. Like I said, we wake up and we start reciting all our problems. And we put on the glasses, we put on the filter where what we see, we're looking through not rose-colored glasses, but pain-colored glasses. Pain that's defined by a story that we're telling ourselves. And we're doing it as a sort of like defense mechanism. We're doing it to guard our hearts even more from the pain that we've already endured. And it's pain that we weren't equipped with tools to be able to cope with, to be able to alchemize and transform into growth. So what we did was we stepped into a victim mentality. We married that trauma story. We bonded with that trauma. And now we just recite it every single day, where I'm not good enough. Everybody always leaves me. I'll never be financially stable. Everybody always leaves me. I'll never find a partner. I'll never be physically fit. I'll never be healed from what my dad did to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm an alcoholic. I'm an ex-addict. And my life is ruined because of it. All this, it's a story, guys. It's a story. And although it is the literal backbone of the pain we experience every single day, we're holding on to it for dear life, because what it would mean to let go of that story is ego death, self-transformation, having to rediscover and rebuild who we are from the ashes of who we once were, of who we've been telling ourselves we are for the past 30, 40 years or whatever it is, however long you've been living in your trauma story. The reason we aren't letting go of that story is because what's required to let go of that story is a new you, a new story, a new narrative, a new plot. But what would you rather have? Let me ask you this. What would you rather have? Would you rather continue to live in your pain because it's familiar to you? Or would you rather let go of that pain and step into the womb, the feminine of the unknown, with the potential of building the life that you were really meant to live? One defined by joy, by growth, by transformation, by satisfaction, by contentment, by potential, bro. Like, it's worth it. What would you rather do? Live in the pain because you know it, or step into Pandora's box? It's up to you. It literally is up to you. I make this video to share with you the importance of changing that inner story, because that's where it's all going down. That's the battlefield. That's the playing field that we're all on. You know? It's far out how we're so loyal to our pain. Yet it's the one thing we're always complaining about. I'm unhappy. I'm not happy enough. I'm despairing. I'm broken. I'm heartbroken. I'm not enough. I'll never... All of it, on and on and on. We're drowning in our pain. But it's up to us to shift the story so that we can see that pain of what once was as like stepping stones to step in to the potential of who we really are, or who we can be, who we have the power and capability of being. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, consider leaving a thumbs up so that this video can get recommended to more people like you.